Welcome to the Brave Podcast. I'm your host, Connie Jacob, and I'm really excited to dive in. This year, I want to help you have relational wealth in your life. So that means your family, that means your work relationships, that means your relationships with your students, because our relationships determine everything about the way our lives go. The way our work is going is determined on how are your relationships, the way you feel about life. So many times people say, oh, I've been struggling with anxiety or I've been struggling with depression. And I guarantee you boil it all down and you take the exterior outward circumstances out of it, and you find that it's people related. My coffee table doesn't give me trauma. So people and the way we relate to people matter. And this is a heartbeat of mine. This is why I work in homes. This is why my husband and I have a renovation company where we're restoring the idea of home. This is why I work with schools. Belonging creates resilience is my 25-year mental health work. This stuff matters. And when I was asking myself those 10 questions that I asked us all last week, this was what came up for me again and again when I've asked myself these questions. What really matters to me? Does speaking matter to me? Being on big stages? No, that actually doesn't matter to me at all. Being able to help people have relational wellness, to be able to restore their marriages, to be able to bring children and see the fathers turn their eyes to their children and the children back to the fathers. Like that is what drives me. That's what wakes me up in the morning. I want to dive a little bit into something that I walked a bunch of principals and guidance counselors in Surrey. I have to say, I'm so impressed with the Surrey School Board. They're doing some innovative things. They're bringing me in to train people, counselors, principals, to create a sustainable model that can help kids who are struggling with their mental health and with substance use. And I love it because I don't see any other school board doing that. And of course, I'm really honored to be a part of that. One of the questions that I asked them was a question that my friend Bernie and she's from Australia. She's been on my podcast, fantastic episode. I'm going to have her come on the podcast. We were talking a little bit about, what is connection? This word is getting thrown out everywhere. Like, what is connection? So I'm going to save that for that podcast. That's going to come soon. So just wait for that, everyone. But what hinders connection? What hinders connection? I notice behaviors coming out of me when it comes to my relationships. And the more attuned I learn to become to myself, that are tuning in, the more I notice how I fumble around with how I attune outwards, how I attune to my husband, how I attune to people around me. You'll hear me say a concept called "your mood does not affect mine," and it was so funny. That's one of the concepts that I am coaching these beautiful folks in Surrey on. And when I was making my PowerPoint, I had a I had an interruption, a rupture in a relationship while I'm literally typing out the slide, "Your mood doesn't affect mine." And let me tell you, I'm typing it, I know it, it's theory. And then when it came down to actually like not having my mood affected, I mean, I was like my emotional temperature was through the roof. I was fuming mad. This person had impacted my heart in a really intense way. Now, this all comes back down to, does a person create that emotion in you, or was that emotion already there? I would like to say that that emotion was probably already there. And now I have the opportunity to manage me because I can't control them. Remember, that's one of our things. I don't control anybody but me. The problem is that even though I know that in the moment, I have flipped my lid, I'm in the back of my brain, I'm in my amygdala, and I'm on full on defense mode. And I noticed my behaviors of defense. And to be honest, can I just say this? Pride. Like, do you not like kind of like getting all huffy and puffy? And the more attuned we are looking inwards, the more we can notice these things without shame. The problem with shame is that if you ever kind of have maybe pride like I did, like, you're an idiot, in the right here. I don't want that kind of vibe around me at all. I want to be approachable. I want to be forgiving. I want to love without walls. And so when it comes to these relational ruptures, if I can, without shame, just notice how I'm responding, don't judge it, just notice it. How am I behaving? What is coming out of my behavior? Maybe I want to instantly lash out. Maybe words come out of my mouth. Ooh, maybe there's a post on Facebook and I'm just fuming mad and my fingers just lose control. That's that reaction. And if we can figure out, if we can decide, like, where is that behavior coming from? Why why so snarky? Like, why am I so snarky with my husband? Why am I so defensive? I don't know if anybody else gets defensive with your spouse, but I sure do. And he gets defensive with me. Like, where's that coming from? And oftentimes we haven't made it normal to really look in and actually go to that place of where's this coming from? Getting curious. Because the reason why we have a hard time with it is because shame tells us, see, you suck. And if you didn't suck, if you weren't such a lousy person, you wouldn't be feeling that way. You wouldn't have reacted that way. And it's so far from the truth. Welcome to being a human. Being a human means that we are going to be highly impacted by the people around us all the time, for the better, for the worse, for the neutral. We are highly impacted by one another. Like I said, trauma doesn't happen through things, it happens through people. And trauma, whether it's large or whether it's small, a big T or a little t, those things are in the eye of the beholder. It's how I perceive what has happened to me. I don't know if you've ever been in work relationships or any kind of relationships where when you left, you needed to recover. Does anyone know what I'm talking about? Where you left a place and you didn't even realize how toxic it was until you left. Or maybe some of you are like, yeah, that sounds like my ex. Like, that's how I felt. And so the three steps that I do every day for myself, and even in moments where I notice that I'm freezing in my body or I didn't like the way that interaction went, is I ask myself three questions. You've heard these questions. If you are a veteran with the Brave podcast, you know these. And the reason why I come back to these again and again is because these have been the most simple way for us to find that attuning in, to bring our emotional regulation to a place where we feel like I can handle myself right now. It is honestly the best thing that I've ever found. So are you ready for these three questions? The number one question is, when I get hit with a curveball, or like my friend Nita says, with an exercise ball that just kind of boomed me in the face, I think, what is my resting emotional state right now? If I've had a relational rupture, oftentimes I feel frustrated. Anger is my go-to. Before I feel sad, I feel anger. Anger is easy, right? Sad is hard. It's harder to get to sad. Anger is always a bodyguard. And so I feel angry, or I feel offended, or I feel just all tense. And if I can name that, all of a sudden it brings it out of chaos. And then I ask myself, now, what does that emotion sound like in a sentence? And sometimes what it sounds like is like, who do they think they are? And it's like, let's go a little deeper. Like, now what I'm noticing about my behavior is I'm becoming defensive. I'm putting up a wall. Connection is no longer my goal. In fact, I'm ready to press delete friend. I'm ready to hang up the phone. I'm ready to walk away. I don't want anything to do with this person. Or I'm ready to, like, let my words rip my kids apart. I don't know if anyone else has ever had that happen. Maybe I'm the only one. But that's the behaviors. And just by naming them, I bring them into the light. And this is the number one thing we're all petrified to do. And what's really interesting is that not only are we petrified to do it just with ourselves, like nobody's watching, nobody knows your thoughts, nobody can hear, nobody sees your journal. But then when we actually get into interpersonal neurobiology work, where I'm actually going to ask you to share with a circle, like, hey, what was your resting emotional state? What did that sound like as a sentence? What behaviors came out? Like, it gets so thick with tension, like, oh, I don't want to share that. They're going to judge me. That's what they're going to think. That's what everybody thinks. And so I usually have people do it on post-it notes, and then we put it on the wall, and everybody's like, oh, I'm not alone. But wouldn't it just be amazing if this became something normal? We could ask students, hey, what's your resting emotional state right now? Wouldn't that just be amazing if that became a normal way of doing life in our families? Like in order to repair, resilience is in the repair. And so when I go and repair with my kids, it's like, so what was your resting emotional state and what is it now? What'd that sound like? What behaviors did you notice? Like, imagine this just became normal. Could you imagine how self-aware we all would be? But the reason why we're not is A, because shame tells us that in order to go to this place, you have to acknowledge how much you suck. And that is not true. Here's the thing, you don't suck. Like I said, you're a human, you're having a human experience. And the more you acknowledge that, the more you bring a sense of humility to this earthly body that we all have, and we can navigate our relationships with humility, and we can say, look, I know I blew it on that one. I was really feeling angry, and it sounded to me in my head like I just was so frustrated that you would think that of me, and my behavior was to shut you out, and I'm sorry. I just want to say, like, I want connection with you. I want to ask you a question. So we have those three questions, but I want to ask you a question. When it comes to your behaviors, there's always a story of why we behave the way we do. And again, this whole idea of behavior is communication, right? My addiction is communicating something. My drinking myself to sleep is telling me something. It's like an alarm. My overspending, even though I know I'm not supposed to, my snarkiness. Why did I get caught up in gossip? Like, what's going on? I want you to ask yourself this question when it comes to discovering what's underneath your behaviors. And that is, what am I really longing for here? What am I really longing for here? Those three questions I asked you about emotions, thoughts, behaviors, those are just to bring things out of chaos. But when it comes to behavior and discovering what's underneath, there's a longing. All of our behaviors have a longing underneath. Maybe my drinking myself to sleep. Some of you know that story. When I felt such despair when our home was in chaos. This was 8 years ago, friends. So if you're like, wow, was that yesterday? No, that was a long time ago. But there was a longing underneath for somebody, please, please tell me that this crisis is going to end. But no one could tell me that, and I didn't know it would end. But the longing of my heart was for this to end. That if it's not going to end, then I need to numb this pain. Doesn't make it right. That's just the longing underneath. Maybe I'm defensive towards my spouse because I'm just not feeling like we're connecting. We seem to be missing each other these days. And I get snarky instead of being vulnerable and just saying, hey, like, could we sit down and like look at each other here? Because I feel like we're missing one another. But instead, I react in a defensive mode. Underneath a student's behavior of disengagement is a longing to feel like they belong in a system, belong in that class, belong in the way the world works, and they're feeling like they can't do it. Underneath, there's always a longing. And so I find that if I ask myself, what am I really longing for here? Am I longing to be heard and I'm just not being heard? Am I longing to feel connected, but I'm not feeling connected? Am I longing to feel like people get me, but instead I feel like I'm being judged or misjudged? That question alone can really help you dive to what's underneath your behaviors and can give you the opportunity to make a new choice in how you engage with people. Maybe that teacher down the hall that just keeps giving you a hard time and making you feel like you're the worst teacher on the planet, or they're just not cooperative, or they're judgy in the staff room. Like, maybe the way we respond to them is that longing to be like, why can't we just get along? You know? And so that longing can then give me a choice to figure out, how am I going to manage me? Now that I know that that's my longing, can I fulfill this longing alone? Maybe I just need to let that go. Maybe that relationship is just never going to happen. Maybe I need to let go of trying to control my kids. Maybe this is something I need to surrender. How am I going to manage me now? And so I hope that that helps. I know it's helped me incredibly. And so this year, I am going to be releasing very, very soon my Bring Them Closer online course. And this is for anybody who works with a student or parents a child, especially if they struggle with behaviors or with their mental health. I know everything that I have in this online course that's coming up are things that I wish somebody would have walked me through. Now, I had a counselor that walked me through things, but she never put it in a nice, like, now this is what you do. This is how this works. This is what you do now. It was very like, we're in crisis. What do I do with this? What do I do with this? And so what I've done is I've laid it all out for you. I've laid it all out. And so I can't wait to release that. It's not released yet, but it will be released. And so this is my dream this year is to really come alongside families, come alongside classrooms, see how we can create beautifully brave spaces where you feel that relational wellness that makes you come alive and the people around you as well. So in the meantime, friends, keep being brave.